It's so hot outside that all you want to do is hide inside with the air conditioning. Meanwhile, your dog is out there, stretched out in the sun like they're soaking up rays on a beach in Bora Bora. At this point, it doesn't even surprise you anymore. It just doesn't make sense. With a coat that thick, how are they not just tolerating this, but actually enjoying it? There's no way this is normal. But it's too hot to stand around wondering, so you head back inside to the air conditioning, leaving that question out in the yard. So what's the real reason your dog keeps sunbathing right in the middle of a brutal heat wave? Here's an interesting twist. Humans once looked at sunlight the exact same way, not as a danger, but as a cure. In Greek mythology, Asclepius, the god of medicine, was said to be the son of Apollo, the sun god. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, actually built a solarium at his healing center on the island of Kos, using sunlight to treat everything from metabolic disorders to joint problems. The Roman writer Pliny, according to a number of historical accounts, is said to have written that the sun is the best medicine there is. Modern medicine backs up part of that old intuition. Sunlight has been linked to a lower risk of catching a cold and improvement in certain joint issues. Some epidemiological studies have also found that prolonged sun exposure is associated with an increase in lymphocytes, hinting at a possible immune-boosting effect. And if that holds true for humans, there's a good chance at least part of it holds true for dogs too. The two species share quite a bit of physiological overlap, and dogs' ancestors grew up under that exact same sky. Let's start with the most basic fact. Dogs are already hotter than you, even without any sun involved. A large-scale data analysis in Germany found that the average rectal temperature of healthy dogs is around 101.5 degrees Fahrenheit, with a normal range falling between 99.9 degrees Fahrenheit and 103.1 degrees Fahrenheit. That's higher than the average human body temperature, which sits at around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. In other words, your dog's body is already running hotter than yours from the get-go, before the sun even touches their fur. That's not the reason they seek out sunlight, but it's the starting point you need to understand. That uncomfortably hot feeling you get and your dog's baseline physiology simply aren't the same thing. But a higher body temperature is only half the story. The other half comes down to your dog's ability to take an active role. They're not just a passive body absorbing heat. A study from the mid-1970s found that when dogs were placed in different ambient temperature conditions, they were able to change their behavior in ways that actually altered their own spinal cord temperature. As the environment got warmer, the spinal cord temperature their body chose went up right along with it. One of the earliest pieces of evidence for what's called behavioral thermoregulation, regulating body temperature through behavior rather than just internal physiological reflexes. So when your dog picks a specific spot to lie down, that might not be a random choice at all. Their body could be actively hunting for just the right temperature to feel balanced internally, and sometimes that sweet spot happens to be right in the sun. But if dogs can pick any spot to regulate their temperature, why is it usually the sun instead of a cool patch of shade? For a mammal's brain, light isn't just about heat, it's also a signal for time. A dog's body, like many other animals, runs on a circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour cycle of activity and rest, and natural light is one of the strongest environmental cues that helps keep that internal clock in sync. A study that tracked a group of beagles' activity using collar-mounted devices over several days found that dogs living in environments with natural light exposure and a clear light-dark cycle had far better synced activity-rest rhythms than dogs living entirely indoors. Older dogs lacking natural light exposure tended to start their activity later and rest more throughout the day. But not every dog responds to sunlight the same way. A 2025 study in Canada tracked dogs' activity before and after the clocks fell back for the winter and found that sled dogs living almost entirely outdoors showed a noticeable shift in activity around sunrise, while house dogs showed no significant change. Light really is tied to a dog's circadian rhythm, but how much it matters depends heavily on lifestyle and the schedule humans set for them. So maybe the deciding factor is a lot simpler than all that. They just like the warm feeling sunlight gives them, the same way you feel noticeably better standing in the early morning sun. But feels good doesn't mean completely harmless, and that's something we'll circle back to toward the end of this video. Beyond temperature and body clocks, sunlight also touches something more emotional. Sunlight triggers the release of endorphins, the chemicals that help ease pain and boost mood. A lot of vets believe the same mechanism is at play in dogs, helping explain why they seem more relaxed and content after a good sunbathing session. Sunlight may also play a bit of an antibacterial role on the skin, since anaerobic bacteria tend to thrive in dark, damp environments, something sunlight, in its own way, helps keep in check. On a related note, here's something interesting most people don't know. Dogs synthesize vitamin D from sunlight quite differently than humans do. Their skin can barely convert the vitamin D precursor at all, no matter how long they bake in the sun, because of an enzyme in their skin that's extremely efficient at breaking it down. A dog's main source of vitamin D actually comes from their diet, not the sun, which might also explain why sunbathing, for them, leans more toward comfort and mood than an actual biological necessity the way it is for us. A 2005 study looked at how UVC light at a 254 nanometers wavelength affected bacteria in chronic wounds. Bacterial levels dropped significantly after just a single exposure, even for tough strains like MRSA. That same principle light being able to kill bacteria is part of why natural sunlight has long been seen as a kind of natural disinfectant, both for wounds and for skin in general, in humans, and possibly our four-legged friends as well. But there's an important part of this we can't skip over, because the line between enjoying the sun and being in danger is a lot thinner for dogs than most owners realize. Their instinct to seek out sunlight isn't a mistake in itself. That instinct was shaped in a world without heat-trapping concrete driveways, without the kind of extreme heat waves we deal with now. A dog's cooling system has its limits, and those limits don't show up on their relaxed face until it's already too late. A 1,981 study tracked 3 dogs, measuring airflow patterns, oxygen consumption, and water loss through respiration under different conditions. The results showed that panting is a dog's main pathway for evaporative cooling. As temperature or activity level rises, dogs shift to a breathing pattern that involves the mouth more heavily to boost heat loss. Unlike humans, dogs have almost no sweat glands in their skin. Panting is basically the only fan they've got, and like any machine, that fan has its limits your dog has no way of calculating in advance, since they don't know the pavement is holding on to heat, or that today's UV index is higher than yesterday's. So don't look at a dog sunbathing and just think, guess they like it, I'll leave them be. If they're relaxed, able to get up and move into the shade whenever they want, and have clean water nearby, that's a normal, even healthy choice. But if the panting gets heavy and doesn't let up, if there's unusually heavy drooling, dark red or bluish gums, or a wobbly, unsteady walk that's no longer sunbathing, get them into the shade immediately. Give them access to water and call your vet if there's no improvement within a few minutes. The safest windows for sunbathing are early morning or late afternoon, during summer's 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. stretch. Keep outdoor time short and stay alert. Ancient Greeks actually built an entire healing center just to honor the sun's power to heal. Your dog might carry that same instinct, even though they've never heard of Hippocrates or Asclepius. So back to our original question. For dogs, it likely comes down to the fact that their bodies really do work differently than ours. They run hotter, they're capable of actively regulating their own temperature through behavior, and they respond to light as a cue that syncs up their internal clock. But here's what none of those mechanisms tell a dog, where their own limit actually is. They can still look perfectly relaxed even when they're getting dangerously close to that edge. Dogs aren't being reckless when they choose to lie in the sun, but they have no way of knowing when it's time to stop. That part's on you. If this changed the way you look at your dog sunbathing, subscribe, because understanding the little things is exactly what keeps them safe. And if panting is the only fan a dog has for cooling down, What happens when that fan starts to overheat? The line between normal panting and a real heat stroke is a lot thinner than you'd think, and that's exactly what 4Paws Mind will show you how to spot and act on immediately. In the video, if your dog has heat stroke, do this immediately.